A very warm good evening to everyone with a very warm welcome from the North Zone Orthopedic Association. We are back with you with another webinar on Elizarov, the magical machine. This time we are dealing with the deformity correction in the adults. And we have the doyens of deformity correction, Dr. Mangal Parihar as a keynote speaker and a panelist, Dr. Suresh Bhola, Dr. Altaf Kavusa. We've covered right from Mumbai to Jammu and Kashmir. And on the way in the City Beautiful, we have Dr. P.N. Gupta and Dr. Siddharth. The city with the Golden Temple, Dr. Tarandeep Singh, who's doing a tremendous amount of work in deformity correction. I am from the Manchester of India, Ludhiana. And we have from the pious place of Jammu, near the Vaishno Devi. So you better be friends with him if you want to visit Vaishno Devi as a VIP. Our worthy president, Dr. Sanjeev Gupta. I'll now request Dr. Sanjeev Gupta to extend his welcome to Dr. Mangal Parihar and formally open the session for academic deliberations.
Thank you, Dr. Harpal. I welcome our keynote speaker, Master Magician, Dr. Mangal Parihar, to this webinar. I welcome all the panelists and the organizing team to this webinar, and I welcome all the attendees. And without much time, I declare the webinar open.
I'll now request our trade partners. Please introduce the panel. This is another request from the North Zone and in my personal capacity, support for IACON 2023 to Lucknow.
Thank you, Dr. Harpal Singh, sir. I am Dr. Vipin Tyagi, along with my teammates, Dr. Deepika Chhabra and Mr. Amit Saxena. We thank North Zone Orthopedic Association, the Adult Correct, Dr. Mangal Parihar, Center for Limb Lengthening and Reconstruction, Mumbai.
Vipin, please continue. I'm not getting the slide share.
Okay. Special thanks to Dr. Sanjeev Gupta, President, North Zone Orthopedic Association and Professor and Head, Postgraduate Department of Orthopedic, Government Medical College, Jammu. Thank you, sir, for your blessings. Dr. Harpal Singh Seli, Professor and Unit Head, Department of Orthopedics at Dayanand Medical College, Ludhiana. Secretary, North Zone Orthopedic Association and Coordinator for the series on Elizarov. We thank you, Dr. Harpal, sir, for convening this series of webinar. Esteemed Chairman, Dr. Altaf Ahmed Kavusa, Professor, Department of Orthopedics, Government Medical College, Srinagar. Moderators, Dr. P.N. Gupta, Professor, Department of Orthopedics, Government Medical College and Hospital, Chandigarh. Dr. Siddharth Sharma, Associate Professor, Department of Orthopedics, PGI-MER. He has a special interest in foot and ankle surgery, complex deformity correction. Panel members, Dr. Suresh Kumar Bhola, Polio and Deformity Correction Center, Kurukshetra. Dr. Tarandeep Singh, MS Ortho Fellow, Reconstructive and Elizarov Surgery, Bones and Balance Clinic, Amritsar. Thank you to all experts for sparing your valuable time to share the knowledge. Welcome to all attendees present with us today. We bring to your kind notice that this webinar is streaming on Facebook Live. The recording will remain on Jacksonpal's YouTube channel for reference and knowledge sharing. We request all attendees to please post your queries by text in the Q&A box, which will be answered at the end. Due to the time constraint, please share your questions during the webinar itself as text. I will now request Dr. Harpal Singh, sir, to kindly take over.
I'll request Dr. Siddharth, who is the moderator today, to take over the proceedings and start.
Thank you, sir. A very good evening to all of you, and special thanks to North Zone Orthopedic Association, as well as our keynote speaker, Dr. Mangal Parihar, who of course needs no introduction. So we have structured this program in a way that people who would like to do deformity, as well as those who are doing deformity, enjoy it. So there is a little bit for everyone. And how we have structured is mainly through case discussions. So we begin with simpler cases and we move on to the more complex one, and each case highlights one or two unique aspects of deformity correction. So like Dr. Harpal has already said, please feel free to drop in your questions and the faculty will be happy to answer those. So let me start off with the first case. So this is a 32-year-old male who had a tibial fracture 3 years back for which interlocking nail was done, and an ankle fracture 2 years back for which fixation was done. I don't have the radiographs at that time, but now he presents with pain and swelling around the ankle. As you can see here, his ankle is swollen up. The ankle grossly looks normal. He has no comorbidities, but he is a smoker. And when we look at the radiographs, you can see that the ankle is arthritic. It is tilting into valgus. And in fact, it was referred to me by a colleague for ankle fusion. Now, if you look carefully, this is obvious, the ankle deformity. But if you look above, he has an interlocking nail in situ. And even with this not so good quality X-ray, you can see that there is something going on at the level of tibia. So we get a scanogram. And here you can see that there is a tibial deformity. That's the mechanical axis. And as you would all know, this is a varus deformity of the tibia. So it is so important when you have one deformity to look for other deformities as well, especially if it is an old trauma case. The lateral full length scanogram shows that there is no other deformity. So this is in essence a uniplanar deformity of the tibia with an arthritic ankle. So coming on to the deformity part, of course, the ankle arthrosis needs ankle fusion, but how would you approach the patient as a whole? How would you approach the lower limb deformity? So when you plan your correction, you can do this by anatomical axis planning or mechanical axis planning. And here the anatomic axis planning is shown. So you first draw the axes of the proximal segment and you choose the midpoint from two separate points. As you have seen here, you draw a line connecting these 2 points from the middle of these 2 points. And then this is the axis of the distal fragment, and where they intersect, that is the cora. So this shows that the cora is actually a little above the fracture hump. So please remember that the fracture hump may not always be the point of cora. You have to do your planning meticulously. So the other way to do a planning is a mechanical axis planning, and herein you first draw the medial proximal tibial angle. So that's the proximal tibia. We know that the medial proximal tibial angle is 87 degrees. We can also see this on the other side. But look what happens when you draw the distal angle. Now this ankle is in valgus, and if you draw the LDTA, we know that normally it should be 90 degrees. But look what happens to the cora. Now we know that the cora cannot be outside the tibia just because the ankle joint is in valgus. So the cora is falsely shown to be here, whereas it should have been something here in the middle of the tibia. So this illustrates that mechanical axis planning can only be used if the ankle and the tibial joint lines are normal. So please remember in mind when you're planning this. So anyhow, we move forward. So we planned a cora, a deformity correction at the level of the cora. And for the ankle that was in valgus, I planned a wedge correction at the level of the ankle. So we would be correcting the deformity here and also here to get a straight axis. So this shows the bump. That's the location of the cora. And you can see that the osteotomy has been done at the level of the cora. The Elizarov hinge has been placed at the level of the cora. And because this is an osteotomy rule number 1, you get a pure opening wedge. So here you can compare the preoperative and the postoperative corrections. And because he was a smoker, the osteotomy and the arthrodesis took some time to heal. But at 1 year later, the osteotomy has consolidated. These are his clinical pictures. And this is a small video of him walking that he sent to me recently. He does have a little bit of pain and stiffness, but this should improve over time. So then what is the take-home message from this simple case? So the most important is when you have one deformity in a lower limb, look for other deformities, look beyond the obvious, especially if this is a trauma case. Remember your osteotomy rules. You can use anatomical and mechanical axis planning in tibia, but remember that one may be useful over the other, and we will repeat this theme as we get to see more and more cases. Thank you. So I'm going to stop my screen sharing now. And the next case is going to be presented by Professor P.N. Gupta. Sir.
This is basically good evening everybody. This man is aged 54 years, had an injury to the
Sir.
Yeah.
Hello, sir.
Yeah, Dr. Altaf. So this was injury treated to 30 years back by a quack, and patient had a genu valgum of the left knee, clinically measured about 30 degrees, and it's not a progressive deformity. And these are the radiographs which show a sort of a remodeled and malunited distal femoral fracture somewhere there. So my question to the panelist, Dr. Dr. Harpal, what would you do? Bracing alone at present and later on a total knee, because it is a painful condition for him, or you would counsel him for an immediate total knee replacement, or a osteotomy to realign, or do something else? Dr. Bhola, what would you like to do?
Sir, thank you. I will, because I like to correct the deformity. So
See, the knee is arthritic as well.
Yeah. It doesn't matter once the loading gets...
This is a loading X-ray. This is a loading X-ray.
Yeah, once the loading gets in the mechanical axis and valgus deformity is corrected, I think it will be much better of the pain, as well as even if we perform some future intervention, it will be helpful in that as well.
Dr. Siddharth, would you agree or would you like to differ?
So, sir, yes, I would agree. So, no doubt the joint looks a little arthritic, but my 2 cents is, even if he needed a total knee replacement, he would need a correction of the gross deformity.
Would you like to have a look at the lateral view as well?
Of course, sir. So we always look at
exactly, because
yes,
if you find a lot of patellofemoral arthrosis, then perhaps entire thing would change. But let me put it straight to everybody that here I have not deliberately not shown lateral view because that was all normal. So would you consider a osteotomy now, or would you consider a total knee? He is 54. Please remember.
Osteotomy, sir. My choice.
Okay. So where would you like to do the osteotomy, Dr. Siddharth?
So, sir, again, I would like to plan this case in detail. So ideally, if given a choice, I would always like to go with rule 1, but we also have rule 2.
So where exactly would you like to do osteotomy? In the femur, on the tibia, or you will do with a little different approach?
So, sir, it would depend upon where the deformity is. That we would know by our planning.
Yeah, I think it requires a full-length X-ray. So we have actually done a full-length X-ray here from the hip to ankle. But I have deliberately cropped the lower area because the angles were normal in the tibia. So there was a deformity in the distal femur. Dr. Altaf, can you please mute yourself? So this was the planning done. So this was a 30 degrees of valgus. We did a planning on the anatomical axis where we did a mid diaphyseal line there, and we did this distal femoral joint line and a 81-degree lateral angle from the region of the medial tibial spine or the medial aspect of the femoral notch. So it's one and the same thing, it amounts to same thing. So this was around 30 degrees deformity. So Dr. Siddharth,
sir,
this deformity is quite close to the joint there.
Yes, sir.
So where would you like to do the osteotomy?
So the osteotomy rule number 2 can come to our rescue, sir. We can do.
Would you like to do osteotomy here?
A little higher, sir, because then higher. I would, yes.
So what would you like to fix it with? Would you like to do a Elizarov? Would you like to do a LRS, or would you like to do a plate or something else, or nail or distal femoral nail or something?
My preference in this case would be to do a gradual correction with an Elizarov or preferably a hexapod, sir.
Okay. So Dr. Altaf, would you agree with this or would you like to differ?
Sir, I would like to do this Sir, I got disconnected in between.
Yeah.
May I have you again?
Yeah, this is the deformity planning
Uh-huh.
on a anatomical axis,
Uh-huh.
and this deformity is 30 degrees of valgus.
Right.
The distal femur, the tibia is normal, so I've cropped that out.
Okay.
So this red lines, they show the, so this is around maybe 3 centimeters from the joint line. So what would
Okay.
you do here? That's the cora.
Yeah. So we would like to do it. We can do an osteotomy above the cora.
So you would
And
like to
then-
do osteotomy above the cora,
Look,
somewhere
no,
here?
at the level of the cora, at the
At
level of
this
the
one?
cora, but yeah, at the we can do osteotomy above the level of cora, but the hinges must be at the level of the this cora.
So you would
The
like to do
osteotomy can differ.
osteotomy here.
Osteotomy can differ. Actually,
But-
I'm not getting your screen, sir.
There's
There's some
think
technical problem
some
with
problem.
my.
Okay, not a
Yeah,
problem.
Yeah. Please,
Okay.
you go ahead.
So
Let's
I'll go ahead.
proceed.
I'll go ahead.
Yeah.
So this,
Ian, I
this
have a
is,
question.
yeah, Dr. Harpal.
Yeah, I have a question first.
Yeah, Dr. Harpal.
In a valgus knee, when you have to take a long leg radiograph, how do you ensure that the distal femur is absolutely in AP? Because there is always some component of rotation that's associated with valgus.
See, basically, all the X-rays taken are in knee forward or a patella forward position. Right. So
But
this
here
is
when
a,
we look at it, the patella is not centered.
yeah, but knee is forward. So there was a little the lateralization of the patella here.
I think Mangal has some algorithm for this. Mangal, can you just give your input on this?
Essentially, what happens is the patella is slightly subluxed whenever it's a severe valgus. So you have to flex extend the knee and look at the you have to look at the flexion extension axis of the knee, and then place that flexion extension axis parallel. So when you do that in extreme valgus, almost always you will get the patella slightly lateral, though in all other cases the patella has to be central. In extreme valgus, the patella will be slightly laterally subluxed. So you do your x-rays like that, and you carry out your surgery also with the patella facing slightly lateral.
Dr. Mangal, would you expect this patella to be lateral in a long-standing case or a short-standing case even?
Any case
Any
like
case.
this is essentially long-standing. Matlab kya? This is developmental, na?
30,
This is
30 years. This is a 30 years old deformity.
Exactly. So usually these, even in when they come in idiopathic, like adolescent girls,
Yeah.
the patella is slightly lateral.
Yeah, slightly lateral. Exactly. This is what I think I have also observed, that patella remains a bit lateral, even if you go in with a knee forwards. Yes.
So the other thing you have to look at is you look at the shape of the condyle.
Yeah.
Okay. On the right side, you look at the right knee. You see the proper shape of the condyle, kind of that U-shaped condylar notch.
Yeah.
If on the left side, if you try to do too much of internal rotation, trying to get the patella centered,
Yeah.
then the distal end of your femur will not look normal. And that is the important differentiating point.
Yeah. Here, exactly, the patella is central, but here it is lateral.
Yes, but look at the distal end of the femur on both
Yeah.
sides.
This is showing the same profile.
Yes.
Similar profile. Okay, I'll proceed forward. So, Dr. Mangal, would you like to do osteotomy here at the cora or a little higher up?
ये mental masturbation है. Nobody can do the osteotomy lower
Yeah,
down.
this is too low osteotomy exactly.
Yeah.
So what we did was we did a planning and placing the hinges here as Dr. Siddharth said. So we did this planning and this came out something like this. So what I did was used an external fixator assisted osteotomy and internal fixation. So these are the intraoperative Siam images. So put a pin here in the proximal femur, put a pin just near to the knee joint region and did a osteotomy somewhere in there. So now my question to Dr. Altaf, would you go in for an acute correction or gradual? Would you do a peroneal nerve release as well? I think we lost the connection.
Sir, so Dr. Altaf has some problems with his connection.
Yeah, Dr. Siddharth, would you do a peroneal nerve release as well, or?
If it was a gradual correction, sir, because my preference would be a gradual. So at that, with that procedure, I would not do a peroneal nerve release.
Okay. Dr. Taran, would you do a peroneal nerve release with a gradual correction, or would you not? Dr. Bhola?
Yes, sir. So
Would you
I
do-
will always be on a safer side, and I'll release the peroneal nerve because we are in.
Dr. Mangal, would you do a peroneal nerve release if you plan for a gradual correction?
Gradual or acute for this at this level, the
Yeah.
femur, I wouldn't.
So this is a 30 degrees deformity. Exactly. I think what we did was we did a peroneal nerve release, and I'll just briefly take you through the steps. Of course, this is not the same patient. This is a different patient. I've just shown it to show the operative steps where we expose the femur, put in a pin here, put in a pin here, put in an external fixator. Either you can use a LRS or you can use a AO type fixator. It is your choice. Do the osteotomy, distract this, check with the cautery test, and fix it internally with a plate. And this is checking with a cautery test. If you place the cautery lead stretched over it from the center of the hip to the center of the ankle, it will go through the center of the knee. So this is what we did. We did not go for a lot of overcorrection. And this is the post-op, and you can see the translation, what you saw on the planning stage. And this is the fixation done with the plate. And a bit of artificial bone was added here in the opening wedge area. And this is a 9 months follow-up. All united, patient is pain-free, and he has not come back for follow-up because of the COVID reason, but he is now around 18 months of follow-up. So the message is that you can use a fixator for a fixator-assisted internal fixation. But if you are doing an osteotomy at the above the level of or below the level of cora, then it has to be a translation along with. So I stop my screen sharing.
Thank you, sir.
So that's the osteotomy rule 2. What Siddharth showed was osteotomy rule 1.
Yeah, this was the osteotomy rule 2.
Yeah, where the cora and osteotomy is at the same level. In osteotomy rule 2, the cora is at what you can call the the right level, and the hinge is at the right level, but the osteotomy is away, or you can call it the wrong level theoretically. But as long as you create that translation, then axis is restored. So if we get any questions, we can pass on the questions. Who's looking at the questions? If there are any questions,
Deepika ma'am, if there are any
audience.
questions from, yes, please pass on to us so that we can
Right.
answer them as we go.
Right, sir.
Okay.
Okay.
So Dr. Altaf is next, and Altaf
Yeah.
sir, I will be presenting your
Yeah,
slides, and please tell me when to change it.
Yeah.
Yes.
So we start, sir. I think, so Mangal sir, should I be discussing about oblique plane, I suppose?
Yes.
Yeah, please, Siddharth, please open
Yes,
the
sir.
presentation.
One moment, sir.
Yeah. So we have the oblique plane there.
Yes.
Now, this is a 45 years old female who came with a traumatic deformity of the right leg. It was a malunion. Next. So on AP plane, you see there's a valgus deformity, and on a lateral, you have a recurvatum deformity. Next. So these are the angles, mid-diaphyseal angles. You find out the cora. Cora is above the malunion. So it's a 20-degree deformity on the AP plane, while as you have a 35-degree deformity recurvatum on the lateral one. So we got to plan it. You draw the axes, you draw the y-axis and the x-axis. This would determine the anterior and posterior one. So this is the deformity which is on the convexity on the medial side. This is 20 degrees. So you go posterior, since he has a recurvatum, this means 35 degrees. Then you bring out the resultant of this. So this brings out the motor unit, and this brings out the hinge placement. Then you go on plotting. You place a ring over this and then find out which rings you're going to put the hinges around. So then once you have done this planning, you do an osteotomy at the level of the cora, and you see you have a lateral opening wedge on the AP plane, and you plate Siddharth, it will come up. And then you have an anterior opening on the, this is anterior opening, so that both deformities, the oblique plane is corrected in one go. By just distracting at the motor unit, the wedge opens on both sides. So this is the pre-op, and this is the correction that has been achieved in both planes. Rather, it's an oblique plane, and the deformity appears in AP as well as a lateral one. So this is how you deal with the oblique plane deformity. Okay. Next, please. So we are now discussing this. Go ahead, please. Okay. Then I'll be showing this. This is an interesting case about valgus deformity around ankle. The importance of showing this case is the secondary effects of ankle deformity on the rest of the foot joints. So this is a 33 years, go back please. This is a 33 years old male who has had osteomyelitis in the childhood, osteomyelitis of the fibula that resulted in this valgus ankle. Okay, now you see he has a 55 degrees of valgus deformity. There is no fibula distally, and the cora you find is just above the ankle. And a difficult area to do a deformity correction. But the point highlighting here is to show the effects of this valgus deformity on the rest of the foot. Next, please. Okay, now look at the lines. You see, this is the ankle joint line. Next, you have the lines of the tibia, tibial axis, then the talar axis, as well as the calcaneus. All are distorted. They're supposed to be in one. You see, once you have this ankle valgus deformity, it has a compensatory varus at the subtalar joint. So, once somebody is planning a supramular correction, one has to keep in mind that once the correction happens, the foot has to come back into the subtalar joint has to come back into its original position. The compensation has to go back. But it depends upon whether the subtalar joint is flexible or not. If it is flexible, then the axis will be restored back. But in case it's fixed, then you might need another osteotomy in the calcaneus to restore the overall mechanical axis. Next, please. So this is the osteotomy done at above the level of cora, because you couldn't do an osteotomy just so close to the actual cora. But the hinge placements have to be around the cora level. So once you go on distracting, this is after the correction of this. Once we achieved the correction, this calcaneal ring was removed so that to ensure ambulation again and weight bearing. Next, please. So here you see the wedge is opened up. There's an overlap of the ring. You cannot see the actual osteotomy rule 2, the distal fragment sinking in. Next, please. And here you have the wonderful correction. The ankle is restored, and all the axes, if you take the long, this axial view, the tibial axis, the talar, and the calcaneal axis, all are in one line. Fortunately, in our case, the subtalar joint was flexible, and we were able to manage it within the ring itself. So once we had a ring, once we had a ring in the calcaneus, on distracting it on the medial side, we were able to correct the varus also, since it was flexible one. Next, please. So this is the clinical picture at 2 years. You can see on the right side, the pre-op, while as you have the corrected one on the left side. Thank you.
Okay, wonderful case, Altaf sir. My one question to you, because this patient had the distal fibula, the lateral malleolus was essentially missing, and
Yeah.
all the lateral ligament stabilizers were gone. So once you corrected the deformity, did the patient experience any ankle instability? And
No,
did you
not at
need
all.
any secondary soft tissue procedures for
No,
that?
no. If you see that distal part of the ankle is still there, distal part of the fibula, it's only the middle part. And since it has been a long-standing one, once you are able to manage the correction at the supramalleolar level, the axis is restored. So you don't have any kind of ligaments instability thereafter.
Okay, sir.
No, his question is pertinent because if you read in terms of, there are papers when you talk of excision of the fibula or
Fibula, yes.
fibular graft, they say you got to be X centimeters above the
Above the
syndesmosis.
Yeah.
Otherwise, you get instability. Your case was almost at the syndesmosis and it didn't have any instability.
Yeah, yes.
Number two is those of us who have seen enough of fibula hemimelias where even the whole fibula is absent. The entire distal fibula is absent. Still at 18 years, 17 years, 20 years, these patients will come with the talus fully in the mortis. It does not shift out.
Yeah.
I don't know what exactly is the reason. It's not even subluxed. It's perfectly aligned. So as long as the moment you do your osteotomy and get this aligned, the the talus is well aligned. So that's, I don't have the answer to that. That's just
Yes. Actually, sir, once you have corrected, you have restored the mechanical axis, then the ground reaction factors are all again also restored. So they don't put, they don't put in a lateral thrust again. Yeah.
If you look at the standard literature, that's what Siddharth is asking.
Yeah.
A normal ankle, they say that if you excise too much of the fibula and go too close to the syndesmosis, you will get ankle instability. So that may not be entirely correct. That's what I'm trying to point out. As you're seen in your case, then seen in fibular hemimelia, PN
there could be, sir, there could be
PN,
one difference also, because this has been a long-standing one. Over the period, it has established in such a way that it has taken a new shape now. So in acute, once you have cases where you have taken out the fibula in an acute setup, they might be prone to more this instability. While as a chronic one that has happened over a period of some 20 years, 30 years, the ankle has adapted to a new position. And that too, once we had this distal syndesmosis intact.
Mangal, you were saying something?
No, I was asking you this. We were talking about this.
I've listened to that.
So, but what you also will have seen a lot of
fibular hemimelias. They never subluxate out. No, never.
Yeah. So there is some mismatch between the conventional and the chronic literature.
Yeah.
Right, sir. So thank you for those comments.
I had one more question for Altaf.
Right, sir.
It was on the AP X-ray.
Yeah.
Meaning that was slightly overexposed X-ray, but it seemed like it was not fully healed over there.
No, it's absolutely healed, sir. If you go back, it's absolutely. There's no issues with the union. Rather, sir, in fact, if you have seen that there was a ledge-shaped osteotomy, it happened. It was, but then I took it as a welcome step.
No, not in this case. I'm talking of the oblique plane.
No, sir, it was well united, sir. It was well united, sir. Actually, there was no X-ray available after the removal of the ring. I have not shown it that. That's why it might be appearing that.
But so in some of these cases, you find that there is a stiff fibrous non-union. There is no mobility, but there is no bone bridging the gap in these deformities. Do you always do an osteotomy in that, or like me, I just distract stiff fibrous non-unions and they throw bone? What is your take on that?
In case of some stiff non-union, sir.
Yes.
Yeah. So my job, I do a fresh hematoma in them. I put in an osteotomy through percutaneous osteotomy, give fresh hematoma, and then try to get union with that.
Okay. But so you never do pure distraction.
I do in distract accordion manner. I do, but I never had any problems with my deformity correction. This is in case of non-unions, I would do a fresh hematoma.
Yeah, but I'm asking that only. In a fresh, in a
Stiff non-union.
fibrous non-union with deformity,
Yeah.
what I normally do is I just distract it. According to
Okay.
what I have seen, the process of distraction neutralizes the
Except
forces and provides stability at the non-union, and that tissue goes on to change into bony tissue. I have not found the need usually of doing an osteotomy when it's a stiff fibrous non-union.
But so my take is I usually do it because I try to induce some more biology in it. So once you have done a percutaneous osteotomy, also it throws out fresh hematoma. And then it has the possibilities are more of regenerating rather than simply distracting. This is my experience. I never tried like that way.
Okay. The next time you get a stiff fibrous non-union,
I'll try your method. I'll try your method.
Okay.
So that's a wonderful one, sir. And in fact, it reminds me of the famous Olympic athlete, of the Russian athlete, which Elizarov treated, by just distracting the non-union. It's very famous when you go back to the history. So we move on, and the next speaker would be Dr. Suresh Bhola.
So, dear friends, I'm presenting one case of Genu valgum. Both the sides they are involved, as you can see, and he is a 17 years old male. We first do the left side. Earlier surgery was done in somewhere else, and it could not correct the deformities. This picture has been put to find out because we are mainly dealing with the frontal plane. We must always look at the deformity in the sagittal plane if FFD of the knee is there. So first left side is being done, full length X-ray. How to do the operation before that, where are the deformities? We do MAP and ABC test. What is MAP test? M stands for mechanical axis deviation. Center of the head to the center of the ankle, and we find out, as in this case, valgus is there and how much it is there. After that, of the map, A comes. A means analyze the joint angles. Take 4 lines. Where is the proximal joint line of the femur and lower end of the femur, upper end of the tibia, and lower end of the tibia. Once we do this, then we can find out where the which bone is at fault. P of the map, which means we pick up the bone, whether it is the femur or the tibia, because in this case, both the angles at the near the knee, LD, FA, and MPTA, they are at fault, which means both the bones they are deformed. And after that, we come on to the ABC. ABC, A stands for apex of the deformity. First of all, femur. In the femur, as we can see, that the proximal anatomical axis of the fragment and distal, they do not intersect within the femur. So there is an hidden deformity. There are 2 apex present in this case in the femur. Then apex of the deformity in the tibia. Here also you can see proximal and distal bone fragments. They are not intersecting inside the bone, which means 2 apexes they are there. Instead of 1 apex, there are 2 apex, and it is a multi-apical deformity. The hidden deformity is there. This is the hidden deformity. And ABC, B means bone cuts. They should be very near to at the apex or near to the apex, so that amount of translation is not too much. And then whether you have to do the things gradually or in an acute fashion. So dear friends, we prepared the frame, we erected the frame and did the lateral popliteal nerve release as well. We did fibular osteotomy, osteotomy at the upper end of the tibia and lower end of the tibia on the left side. After that, we did the femoral osteotomies and left side was corrected, as you can see in this thing, in this X-rays and pictures. After 1 year of that, we did the right side. Again, the planning was done for femur, tibia, hinges, frames, and as you can see, lateral popliteal nerve has been dissected as has been advised by the Dror-Pelle. And in this side, we applied hexapods to correct various deformities so that we are much more precise in corrections. These are the end results. And you can see there is slight valgus in both the tibia. On the left side, it was there because there was still some epiphyseal lines they were seen at the during the correction, and I thought they will cover up. And the correction is much more precise on the right side. We also have to see sagittal plane while correcting the frontal plane, because if we create any deformity in the sagittal plane while correcting only frontal plane, that will jeopardize all your results. So take home message is, genu valgum most of the time we think is a deformity of the femur, but it can be femur and tibia or only femur or only tibia. Second thing, as you start getting mature in the deformity correction, the results they get start getting better. And the third thing, there can be more than one apex in one bone, and 2 or 3 apex might be there, and multi-apical deformities might be there. And fourth thing is that whenever you correct the deformities, you must take into account neurovascular structures which are there and which might get, if stretched, can jeopardize the results. Thank you very much. And now,
Bhola sir, that was an excellent case.
thank you, sir. Thank you very much. Sir.
Yeah.
How,
Sir, why do you think you got a better correction on the right side as compared to the left side? So, any reasons for that?
Well, that's what one thing was there, that the epiphysis was still there while I was correcting the left side. So I thought, let slight deformity be there. With the passage of time, that will be corrected. One thing. Second thing, I was much wiser in doing the other side after 1 year. Third thing, with hinges and with hexapod, I think there's a lot of difference. You are more precise with the hexapod rather than the hinges.
Mangal sir, would you like to add?
पहले केस में,
yes sir,
he thought that this what do you call epiphysis will give him further correction. मतलब पहले केस में वो भोला था, दूसरे केस में भोला नहीं रहा.
Thank you, sir.
Right. So Taran, if you are ready.
Case, I think now Taran, no?
Yes, sir.
Right. We can see Taran and then sort of compare and contrast both the. I think Taran also has a case with a severe deformity and multi-apical, but he has done it with a single cora, with a single osteotomy. So then we can compare and contrast Dr. Bhola's this thing.
So, good evening, everyone. This is 19-year-old male who got, this is a sequelae of osteomyelitis upper and tibia at the age of 1 year. Serial debridements were done at that time. Now he presented with the severe varus, internal rotation, procurvatum deformity of the left tibia, shortening of the left tibia around 14 centimeter, and valgus and internal rotation of the femur with a hindfoot valgus. These are the clinical pictures of the patient. And coming to the mechanical axis Mechanical axis is center of the hip to the center of the knee for the femur. Mechanical axis of the tibia, and this is the mechanical axis of the whole lower limb. Whereas in normal case, it passes through the center of the hip to the center of the knee to the center of the ankle. Coming to the angles, various angles like lateral distal femur angle is around 70 degree, whereas in normal case it's around 90 degree. And medial proximal tibial angle is 22 degree, whereas normal is 87. So coming to the planning of the case, it's whether you can plan for the single level or double level osteotomy. These are X-ray plannings. First is the single level planning. This yellow line is medial proximal tibial angle around 87 degree, and this distal angle is around 90 degree. This is the angle, Cora, and red line depicts the level of the osteotomy. This is all planning part, and when we correct upon the paper, this will appear as the straight axis. Coming to the double level planning, on the same angles and the same Cora, I have planned for the two osteotomies, one at the proximal tibia region and one at the distal mid-diaphyseal region. Whenever the Cora is outside the bone, there is also some residual Cora. So the line joining the two osteotomies on the bone will give us the two Coras actually. And this yellow line is the axis where the both proximal and distal segment rotates and align itself to the axis. So this is the first osteotomy, and this will be the second osteotomy. Now you can see whole of the line, whole of the axis comes straight. So clinically as well as anatomically, it appears as that cosmesis is much better in double level osteotomy, but it is more technically demanding procedure. So you have to plan for both the osteotomies. So what I did is, earlier I had told, the medial angle is 87 and distal is 90. I did proximal osteotomy, and single level I did single level osteotomy with the fibular resection. Fibular segment is removed here. These are the clinical pictures with the fixator. First I applied hinges and distract the fracture. Then hexapod was applied to correct the internal rotation and for the angulation corrections. These are the final X-rays of the tibial correction. See, the earlier limb appears as varus, and we have talked earlier that femoral angle is around 70 degree, and here the femoral valgus is evident now. And coming to the femoral planning, as already we know that distal angle is around, normal is 90 degree and patient is having 70 degree. So osteotomy, here the Cora is around inside the joint, and osteotomy was done away from the Cora level, so which causes translation in the distal femur region. And further lengthening was planned from the distal tibia region. We can gain only 7 centimeter of the length. The total shortening was around 14 centimeter. Patient developed vascular claudication after that, so we have stopped around 7 centimeter. And these are the pictures of with the fixator. Here you can see the on both the side we have corrected to the near to the normal angles. Distal femur angle is around 88.7. Here we got 87. Medial tibial proximal angle is around 87.7, and we got around 87.6. And this is the final X-rays and final mechanical axis of the patient, exactly center to center in all the 3 joints. And these are the clinical pictures of the patient. And here is small video. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Wonderful result, Taran. Mangal sir, your comments on the 2 cases.
Oh, so that meaning that kind of underlines the difference in approach, that both things can be done. There is never only one way. Each person has different reasons. For example, if I had to deal with a severe deformity, I would break it down into multiple small deformities. And probably today, even Taran will do it. This case, I think, must have been done earlier, which is why he said that technically it becomes a little difficult to manage two osteotomies or to put two hinges. But once you are comfortable with doing it, then you are able to put on two hinges or two osteotomies without too much of a problem. So in that case, instead of having a huge amount of opening at one osteotomy, you have little opening at one and little opening at the other. So your sort of quality of the regenerate, etc., is also good. The one thing, even if I had done one osteotomy, the one thing I would have done differently is to do the femur first, because the femur has a smaller deformity. You can, with internal fixation, you can get it to 90. And even if you are worried that with internal fixation, the angle will be a little bit this way or that way, you can then compensate for it when you're using the fixator on the tibia. So, you know, that I would have approached it slightly in a different manner. I missed that femur cutting. Did he use a fixator or internal fixation there?
Sir, external fixator.
External fixator. Okay. So I generally in the femur, I would tend to use internal fixation, especially if it's a smaller amount of deformity.
Sir, I did this case around 7 years back.
I know, that's what I said. I guessed as much that, you know, this was done early on. That's why I said, but today, if you had to do the same case again, what would you do?
Same as told you.
Yeah.
That internal fixation for the femur and then plan for the tibia with double osteotomy.
I would have myself, hello, can I have a word?
Yes.
I would have also liked to do it at two levels. It would have given me two definite advantages. One is the degree of translation you have had at the proximal end would not be that much. That would definitely be better if we had divided into two osteotomies. And second, it would have given me an advantage that you would be able to lengthen at two levels simultaneously. And that would have decreased the time of consolidation also. And then third thing, that you would not have needed to take that big segment of a fibula. And fourth thing, you see, you have got away with the Taran somehow. It has been an excellent result. But you see, the while translating, it could have penetrated through the skin also, that edge, because you are seeing that there's a lot of translation in the proximal fragment.
Yeah.
So
right.
Two level would have been definitely a better one.
Sir, on a lighter note, sometimes the patients, they pay according to the number of osteotomies.
But then you can pay from those, sir, if you have some difficulties.
Okay. And Taran, looking at him run, I mean, he can run better than many people that I know. So excellent, excellent result.
Now he is an engineer, mechanical engineer.
Right.
This time.
Right. So Mangal sir, we move on to your presentation now.
Yeah, I'll just. Where is share screen? Okay, you can see it?
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
So this is, I'm just 2 or 3 slides on that question which Harpal had asked about valgus femur. So here you can see the patella is central on this side and the patella is central on this side. But if you look at the relationship of the tibia and the femur, this side the femur is overlapping. Whereas all the other thing you can look to judge AP is the medial tibial spine. That comes very, very like a pagoda, they call it. You know, it is straight. And when you keep the patella slightly lateral, now you compare the contour of the femur on both the sides. I mean, there is some arthritis here, but if you look at this curve, the femoral notch, this curve, that now looks normal. Also look at the shadows of the condyles. This medial condyle is perfect in its you can see it as two parallel lines over here. You see, can you see that?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. So now really you can make out the reduction in the joint space, which in this you couldn't make out. This looks weird. You wonder what is going on over here. Why is this sublux? There is no subluxation. It's just a improper positioning. And then to do the surgery also, you keep it in the same amount of rotation so that you are able to see the femur properly. And all the correction that is done, like I told you, in this case, I do a internal fixation. And even though the cora is down here, by doing an oblique osteotomy, essentially your hinge, which is the intact cortex over here, comes more or less at the level of the cora. And this has been done with a medial plate and then slightly overcorrected because her presenting complaint was arthritis on the lateral side. So we've shifted the weight bearing slightly onto the medial side. Younger patients, you just go to the center. This patient was older, and you can judge it on table with the use of an alignment rod, which comes in this osteotomy sets. Using a cautery wire is not a good idea. You have to have a solid rod, which is about 4 or 5 millimeters, I think, in thickness, so that it doesn't bend. The cautery wire which turns will go in different directions. So it's okay as a or kuch agar nahi hai to, but otherwise using the using the cautery cord wire is not a good idea. Now I'm going to just unshare. I'm going to stop share and then I'll go to the other presentation.
Mangal sir, I suppose this is okay. Harpal sir, you go.
Do you use that grid sheet in your intraoperative table underneath? I think that guy is your friend. I did my trauma fellowship in Munich, so he used to mention your name a lot. So they use a grid sheet under the.
No. I mean that's not available. What they have is like a plastic or a perspex sheet where it is inlaid. It's inlaid with this thing. It's inlaid with radio opaque marker.
Wires. Yeah.
Yeah. You can then use that to assess your angulation, but that's not available here. So I don't use that. I use this alignment rod.
So second, my request is before people start with deformity correction, I think the first and the most important thing and the limiting factor in deformity correction is the proper x-rays.
Yeah.
After you finish with your lecture, I think it will be a big thing for everyone who's attending that if you have some slides to show how the proper x-rays and full length x-rays are taken. Or if it's something bolt out of the blue, we can do it next time.
Yeah, I think I'll see if I can get it quickly, but on this computer, I'm not sure it will be there. If it's there, I'll pull it up.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Right. So now we've gone through all of the principles, and the principles remain exactly the same. That is, you have to draw your axes. You have to check that the joint orientation is appropriate, which is how, like Taran showed in his last slide, LDFA, that's the joint orientation line of the distal femur. MPTA, the medial proximal tibial angle, joint orientation line of the proximal tibia. You have to confirm that these are normal and what is your axis deviation. So ultimately, the goal of deformity correction has to be that these joint orientation angles come to normal and the mechanical axis passes through the center of the knee, or depending on whether you're doing it for arthritis, it passes, onto the medial or the lateral side. That you can sort of change it. So doing it with the Ilizarov is actually the simplest way of correcting a deformity, because it offers you the opportunity for infinite correction. You decided this was something and you started correcting it, and then you found that no, I made a mistake in my planning somewhere. You can still play around with it. And as you get sort of better at it, everybody to a certain extent, meaning, see, I'm not arguing against the Ilizarov. There are situations when there is nothing except the Ilizarov. Whether it's a non-union, whether it's a deformity, there's nothing to beat it in some certain situations. But if I can, I would also look at using internal fixation. As long as I can assure the patient that I will have the same accuracy as I have with external fixation. If I can assure that, then I will use internal fixation. And I'm not going to show you the cases where I have not been able to achieve accuracy. Meaning, I planned for something, I used internal fixation, especially nails. Now with these locking plates, you can do it every time. But earlier when we were using nails, there would be 2 degrees, 5 degrees, this way, that way, which sometimes, especially in arthritic situations, is not acceptable. Gross deformity, you get it more or less straight, patient is happy. But if I'm doing an osteotomy to unload a particular compartment and I leave 5 degrees of deformity, the limb looks straight and the patient may be pain-free for the next maybe 4 years, 5 years. But at some point that overloading is going to be a factor again. So especially in, degenerative conditions or overloading situations, you want to be very, very clear in terms of how you get it. So here is a case where we've used all the principles that we normally talk about for getting accuracy. And this guy was a male doctor. Don't know exactly why he had this, probably some old epiphyseal injury in childhood, but he had this deformity from childhood. He came to me not for the deformity so much, but for his medial joint pain, right? So that straight away makes this case needs to be as accurate as possible. You can't afford to be wrong with this, right? And he was a radiologist, trainee radiologist, and needed to get back to working as soon as possible, which would have been a little difficult with external fixation, not impossible, but using internal fixation would have been sort of better for him. So here you can see his, there's a mild flexion deformity if you notice. There is varus and there is no rotation. And this is the way that I look for rotation, and I think this is the way everyone should look for rotation. The axis of the thigh versus the axis of the foot when the patient is lying on his tummy with everything flexed to 90 degrees. So there is maybe a little bit of internal rotation over here. But if you compare it to the other side, he's the same actually. So in terms of symmetry, there is no internal rotation. Otherwise, normally the foot lies about 0 to 5 degrees external, right? So he had mainly this varus deformity, and then we look at the X-rays on the AP as well as the lateral. So he obviously had varus, but additionally, the important thing was, as I showed you clinically also, he had a little bit of flexion deformity. He also had a PPTA, that is the proximal posterior tibial angle, which was 71 degrees. Normal is about 80. Now, there is no point in getting extremely fussed about numbers. Ultimately, what you are trying to do is create normalcy. His flexion deformity was only about 3 degrees. So effectively what had happened was the knee has stretched out to a certain extent to compensate for this PPTA. So we were not very focused on correcting the PPTA. The main issue that we had to do was correcting the varus, right? And that was the planning which you have already seen. Center of the head to center of the knee to center of the ankle. So you can see that there is a varus there on the left side also, but that is a normal varus, 175 degrees with the mechanical axis passing through the medial condyle. At some point, probably as he grows older, he will require an HTO. On the left side, on the right side though, it is 163 degrees and it is significant. But if you look at his LDTA, that is the lateral distal angle, that is 90, which is within the normal range. MPTA is 66, which is grossly abnormal. So his deformity, what Bhola was talking about, MAP was the mechanical axis, then which bone and where you are going to do the osteotomy. So that tells us that the deformity is in the tibia. Now in the tibia, I have to find out where am I going to do the osteotomy and where is the cora. So if I extend an 87-degree line from here, right, then I get his axis more or less straight, right? In this case, I wanted to go a little more onto the lateral aspect. And getting that as the cora, I get the cora here. If I do the osteotomy at the cora, I get a perfect correction because there's not any real deformity here. The one axis is here and the other axis is there. So this one shows those axes. Since the femur was normal, in this case, what we've done is we've extended the femoral axis that goes down and then extended the diaphyseal axis of the tibia. Both of them meet over here and you'll see in white the osteotomy there. Now, if I do an opening wedge, it will look like this. If I do a closing wedge, the thing will be on the medial side. You can see after the correction, there is going to be still a certain amount of discrepancy. So if I use an Ilizarov in this, I can correct both. But patient was more concerned about getting back and he would then only need to use a raise and he would not have pain. So it was decided that yes, okay, we are not going to be worried about the length. So now in the OT, I need to sort of mark out where is the cora. I have to translate whatever I saw on the X-ray onto the patient. One way is that we actually, if you see on the planning, we measure how many millimeters from the joint line is the cora. Right here, it's 71 millimeters. So that can be translated in the theater. You mark out that much and mark out the bone. You mark out the bone so many millimeters below. And the other thing is, I draw the proximal axis according to whatever was the pre-op plan. So I mark out the joint line and then put a marker on it. From there, I will hold the K-wire in a sort of longitudinal thing and measure this on the screen, not on the patient. I have a sort of transparency, which is a large protractor. So I can know that this wire is at the right angle. And then the distal one comes. Using both of those, I find out that this is where the cora is. Now, because I want early healing or quick healing, instead of doing an opening wedge, I'm going to do a closing wedge. When I do this, I need, first of all, I need the rotations to be kept exactly as I want. And I want control of both the fragments. You know what is the problem with doing, when I do an osteotomy, it's going to be a fracture of the proximal tibia. And all of us know the problems of nailing in a proximal tibia. You can get, excessive valgus, you can get procurvatum. So I have to protect against both of those things. So for that, I use, to delineate, I use K wires. Now you see this K wire, it is perpendicular to the shaft. It doesn't look perpendicular to the joint, but it is perpendicular to the shaft. You'll see in a moment in the following X-rays. And 90 degrees to that is another wire which is passed from medial to lateral. So when I see this wire as a spot, I see the antero-posterior wire as a line. And when I see the antero-posterior wire as a line, as a dot, I see the medial-lateral wire as a line. And this one is passed sort of parallel to the joint. So I have an indication from outside, even without doing a C-arm, as to whether or not I'm going to be correct. Now here you can see this wire, you'll see it better in the next pictures. Similarly, in the lateral view, now you can see both the distal wire, this one, and the proximal wire are in the same rotation. They are in the same plane and they are angled to each other. And this one is parallel to the distal joint. So in the normal tibia, you have the proximal and distal joint lines almost parallel. They are a little less than parallel, they're about 3 degrees less. In this case, I want to overcorrect it by about 3 degrees, so I get it right. So that is, then on that wire, I have drilled with a cannulated drill bit and put in a shan screw. So same funda over here. You can see the AP and lateral view that the wires are in perpendicular to each other. And now we've got shan screws. So even if I want these two pins will correct or hold the varus and the valgus, and these two pins will hold the procurvatum and recurvatum. So because they are parallel to each other, I don't have to sort of worry. Even externally, visually, the human eye can make out parallel with a very high degree of accuracy. You can't make out whether this is 3 degrees or 5 degrees. But you take two parallel wires and ask 10 people, 9 out of 10 will be able to tell you. So these wires are put in more, these shan screws are put in more distal, because here the nail is automatically going to go. Here I need to direct the direction of the nail, right? So at the cora, which I have found out, as I told you, I then put in the closing wedge, okay, through a small incision, multiple drill holes, leaving the medial side intact. I take out the wedge and then correct that deformity. Here you can see the wedge not cut as yet. Why it's not cut? Because I want to leave it stable while I create this track. Once I create this track with the owl and then the, what is that called? The cookie cutter, right? When I create that, then the nail is not going to deviate much from that track, number one. Number two, these shan screws are put in such a way that they act as Poller screws. So once I start from here, this nail is not going to deviate medially. It can only stay in this position. And the tendency will be to deviate towards the medial side. So we've created the tract, put in the guide wire, right? And then taken out the wedge and done a closed wedge osteotomy. Now, again here, in the interest of stability, I have taken care to try and protect the medial cortex as much as possible so that that acts as a further stabilizing factor. I just have to hold the leg into some element of valgus. Okay, so that again is an important step. And then it's important to get the guide wire down the center in both the AP as well as the lateral. Okay. Now what I was finding over here, one of the things that happens is you tend, even if you have made the track like this, the nail will tend to go posteriorly. So two polar wires there to direct the nail anteriorly, and then in the distal fragment, an anterior polar wire to prevent the osteotomy from going into flexion, right? So these are all just an amalgamation of principles of deformity planning, amalgamation of principles of trauma. So that's why I find it funny when people say, oh, I'm a nailer, I'm a plater, I'm an Ilizorover. I mean, these are all common principles which are applied to everything. Now, I've got the nail going in. This tract has been made properly. So the nail is not going to deviate much. Plus I have the polar screws. And externally, I can make out that these pins are parallel. Actually, I'm holding this into a little more parallelism, right? And you can see the polar wires which are put in, which are just temporary. Once it's locked in, then I can take those out. So that's his post-operative X-ray right after surgery. We've not done anything much to the procurvatum, but we've corrected that valgus. Another thing is here, I always, in the fibula, I always tend to use a oblique osteotomy, which can be done with a, which I do with a saw. And the reason for that is this osteotomy allows the ends, when it's done with a saw, it allows the ends to ride over each other. A lot of people do an excision of the fibula. That's not needed. When you do it this way, it allows for correction, and at the same time, it still keeps in that fibula heals pretty quickly. So it still keeps you your stability. So now if you see his axis, I have aimed to get his axis through the base of the tibial spine, which is what we will do for an HTO. Since he's already started getting pain on the medial side, that was the plan in terms of, you know, like getting the axis correction. At 6 weeks, he's well ambulant on a stick and a good amount of callus on this side. You can see the callus on the fibula also. So this, essentially speaking, this situation is very, very stable. At the end of 3 months, solidly healed, and he was actually back to work by about 3 weeks with a pair of crutches. And that's him healed. That's the AP lateral and both the obliques. Yeah, I forgot. This was the cause of his varus. He had the exostosis over there. And that's him at the end of, I think, around 6 months or so. Good movement and perfectly corrected. And I'm reasonably certain that he's not going to have any trouble in terms of future chances for arthritis. So that is essentially in terms of doing this, there are many ways that you can do it. For example, in the distal femur, I will use a plate more often than not. In the tibia, if it's lower down in the shaft or metaphyseal diaphyseal junction, I will use a nail. Even in the femur, I will tend to use a nail if it's higher than the metaphysis. But anywhere near the metaphyseal region, a closed wedge gives you that immediate stability, and patients heal pretty well. So that is the so I can answer questions now. How much time do we have left? 5 minutes. Let's see if I have.
So we can allow the attendees to speak. There are two,
Sure,
Indranil Dutt and Mr. Sankaran.
Yes, so ma'am, let's have their questions.
Okay.
And attendees, please, when asking your questions, please direct your question to the faculty whom you want to answer.
Dr. Indranil Dutt, you can speak now. Would you like to speak, Dr. Indranil Dutt?
He's still muted actually.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, may I ask you, sir?
Sure.
Sir, if you do the same case with Elizarov,
yeah,
after how many days you will let him walk freely? Weight bearing, everything.
Depending on, as soon as he's corrected, I allow weight bearing as tolerated.
Yeah, what I mean to say, even with the Elizarov, he can walk with crutches second day, third day, and
that is true. The issue is not walking. The issue is going to work. Going to work becomes a problem, especially in Mumbai. The patient is staying at Andheri, and the hospital that he's working at is at Bombay Central. The only real way of traveling in those situations is by train, for example. So traveling by train with an Elizarov takes a lot of commitment, So if it's a smaller city and the patient is able to travel by a three-wheeler, or patient has his own vehicle, for example, then it's all right. It doesn't, it's not a problem. But otherwise, it can be an issue. So that's what I said, no? That there are multiple, see, when you have an Elizarov, patient keeps coming back and ye wala pin dard karta hai. The bloody fibular wire always gives trouble. Then you have to explain that. So if I have, say for example, you get you have to treat a fracture of the tibia. What will you do for that patient?
Some sort of internal fixation, definitely.
You will do a nailing only, no?
Yes, sir.
90% of us will do a nailing.
Nailing.
Why?
Yes. Easy for patient.
Easy, and then there is nothing. You put the nail in and then you're done.
Forget
so same thing with deformity correction. The only problem with deformity correction is you're always worried that, will I be able to get it perfectly or not? That is always your worry. Now, if you can take away that worry by working in, different ways, then there's no problem. So I don't object to Elizarov, and I use the Elizarov for a lot of situations, meaning when it's a vague deformity, or let's see if I can just pull up that.
You mean to say whenever you are starting to learn deformities, it's better to use Elizarov because you have something even post-operatively where you can correct. Here,
Yeah.
precision is very, very important, and
So now that we are you know, talking about it, what we should do, let me show you one case. Meaning, I showed you a case where everything was lovely. I'll show you the case where
Hello.
things were not lovely.
नहीं अभी नहीं.
Okay, so this lady came again with
ले
a
लूंगा.
similar kind of situation, and she wanted relief of pain.
बात करता हूँ
She
थोड़ी
came
देर.
with, her issue was medial overloading. She had a fracture over here, and she needed to be corrected, and she also had a little bit of laxity. Right? So she was insistent that no, I don't want a fixator, I want internal fixation. So I said, okay, you can see this little bit of laxity over here. So the principle which Dror has described, where your osteotomy exits above the insertion of the MCL, and then you correct the deformity, that will correct your laxity also. So she had the abductor lurch and all that, and her MPTA was 69, LDFA was normal, so she needed only a tibial correction. Right? Lateral was fine. So we decided to do this dome osteotomy and acute correction with the Elizarov. Right? But the stability that I had with this kind of situation was just not good enough. So I used this jig to create that curve, and then it was with a hinge, it was corrected, but this osteotomy was just too proximal. So I didn't get enough stability with this fixator. And then it took time for things to heal. So you notice here, I've done the angulation translation. The cora is somewhere up here. Osteotomy is lower down. It's a dome osteotomy. And I've got the translation. But the amount of stability that I had in this patient was not enough. And some further correction, whatever she required, we did. Okay, so we got it corrected. But the pins started loosening out. The patient was not very compliant with the fixator. And ultimately at 5 months also, she had not healed. Right? 6 months, I thought she's possibly healed here. Let's give her a cast and see, because she wanted the fixator off. Ultimately, she was ununited. Right? So even with an Elizarov, if you don't apply you can see the, lytic pin sites over here. So this patient would have done much better with a simple Tomofix kind of plate. But I mean, this was done before the plate and all was available. So finally, she was moving around like this. When she agreed to trust me again, till then she said, she's not going to undergo anything. But then pain becomes too much. So here again, I'd already she had already burnt her fingers, or I had burnt my fingers with the Elizarov. She was not going to go in for a fixator. So now the Tomofix, clear non-union. We want her axis to come somewhere there. Used a lateral plate because there is no, hinge. So I can't use a regular Tomofix plate. Use the lateral plate, put it under compression and put a lot of bone graft over there, with which she healed. And she was ambulant, So there are situations. So at 6 months, she was well healed. She's still in a little bit of varus. but one sec, I'm not able to see. She's still in a little bit of virus, but her pain and all is gone and she's ambulant. So at some point it is possible that further I may need to do an osteotomy in the femur and give her a little more valgus from that femur if she gets pain. But right, she's I think about 3 years now post-operative. She's not got any pain, because you see on the right side LDFA is 82, on the left side is 89. So I can cheat a little by giving her a slightly valgus femur. Though her MPTA is, we brought it back to normal, but I have not achieved unloading of the medial side. कोई है questions है कुछ?
So there are two persons here, Dr. Pankaj and Dr. Ananda. They would like to ask you a question. Please.
Let's start with Dr. Pankaj.
Sir, my question to Dr. Mangal is, when I asked this question 10 years earlier, that in Dor Pele book, there was interlocking nail was shown for osteotomy, high tibial osteotomy. You said there's a lot of problems. Now, you have shown very good results. I think Elizarov surgeons, when they do a lot of Elizarov, they forget the internal fixation. Then one should take the help of other person who is doing a lot of internal fixation or interlocking. Or Dr. Bola was saying, do Elizarov, more comfortable than internal fixation. But you're right. One is orthopedic surgeon, not Niller or Elizarov surgeon.
That's true, but the thing is that, you know, as you get more comfortable, there is nobody who is an Elizarov surgeon to start with. Everybody starts off as a trauma surgeon, and Elizarov is the add-on. So it's not that they can't use internal fixation, that's why they're using Elizarov. It's just that Elizarov is more convenient. But for certain situations, surely the internal fixation can be a problem. Like I told you, that not all patients will do well with Elizarov also. So you have to have a choice. And you're right, that where you can use internal fixation with accuracy, absolutely nothing wrong with using internal fixation. The convenience factor for both patient and surgeon is there.
Dr. Ananda and Dr. Rahul Jain.
I think Ananda asked the question just now, no?
That was Dr. Pankaj.
Oh, sorry. Okay.
You can speak up, Dr. Ananda or Dr. Rahul.
What is your opinion about the uniplanar fixator in this situation?
In which situation?
The last case you.
Yes, 80% of my cases are done with a uniplanar fixator. 80% of, meaning where you're talking of a high tibial osteotomy kind of correction.
Yes.
Tibia, yeah. So 80% of my cases are done with that.
Okay. Okay.
And most patients are comfortable with that. So this patient had a particular reason why he wanted internal fixation.
Okay then.
And you know, if the patient did not insist, for me, you saw all the steps which I did for the internal fixation.
Yes.
And at the end of that all, still I have that small risk that I might not be perfectly correct.
Yes.
So what do you think is more stress-free for me? Actually, it's the fixator.
Yes.
I put in 4 pins and patient keeps distracting, and then if on day 24 it is not corrected, okay, go distract for 4 days more and it's corrected. So fixator is definitely more hassle-free.
Flexible, you mean?
Yeah.
Give flexibility to the surgeon.
But there are situations where internal fixation is required.
Yes. Yes. Thank you, sir.
Welcome.
Yeah.
Dr. Rahul, would you like to speak up?
I think my question has already been answered, since I was asking about that same LRS with hinge at the for the high tibial osteotomy.
Yes, but one thing you must remember, Rahul, is that the LRS with the hinge is strictly for a HTO.
Yes.
Where you have an intact lateral hinge. What happens sometimes is our ability, our orthopods, as I famously say, they love to do jugaad.
Yes.
So then it will extend. अरे यार distal femur का valgus है तो laterally उसको लगा दो ना. But laterally you can't use this fixator for correcting valgus in the distal femur, for example. Why? Because you don't have that such a strong cortex on the medial side of the femur. The moment you try to do a distraction on the lateral side, the medial cortex will break. Number one. Number two, if you have to put your pins low in the distal femur, you are intra-articular. You're through intrasynovial. So the moment you get an infection, you will have trouble. And usually I speak from experience, meaning if I'm telling you that this will happen, I'm telling you because it has already happened in my hands, right? So I will never use, or I will never even advocate that someone should use that for anything except for a high tibial osteotomy.
Thanks a lot, sir. Thank you.
Ma'am, are there any more questions from the attendees? Ma'am, you are muted.
Siddharth.
Yes, sir. Altaf, sir.
I would like to ask Mangal sir. Mangal sir. Hello. How comfortable you would be if you had to correct that recurvatum also in that patient who had this, which is demonstrated with nail? Intraoperatively, how comfortable would you be dealing with both deformities if you had to correct both of them?
Pretty comfortable. Only thing I would have had to do was, instead of having my hinge only on the medial side, I would have changed my hinge to slightly more posteromedial. So the apex, the wedge, instead of being purely in the coronal plane, would move a little like this. And then you remember I had those pins.
Yeah, polar ones.
On the shaft. So then I can use a fixator. I correct the varus and put a simple AO rod in between the two. And the procurvatum, recurvatum, I correct it this way. And then I can put in the nail.
While you are negotiating the nail again, the nail might take its own position. During passing in the nail.
No. You notice I put in the wire after the deformity was corrected. Sorry, I put in the, no, not after the deformity was corrected. I created the track according to how I wanted it to go along that line. So especially in young bone. Now, if this was a 60-year-old, that proximal tibia is empty. In a 25-year-old, it is full of cancellous bone. So only, and that's why I said that cookie cutter. The cookie cutter creates that track. On top of it, I have Paulus screws. That nail doesn't really toggle too much. Fresh trauma is something else because there can be shattering, there is high energy, so it may not be all. This is a intact bone through which I am creating a canal.
Yeah, I meant to say that if you are using polar K wires or polar screws kind of things, then you will have to negotiate them in both planes. You'll have to manage in both planes. You might have to use polar pins in the lateral position also, so that the nail doesn't go anterior or posterior. That was my point, because you need to control two. It's kind of a real tedious job to do that.
But I did it in this. No, you see, I corrected the varus, but it was tending to go to procurvatum. So I used Paulus screws in the coronal plane to prevent that procurvatum.
Right.
There's a question by Dr. Vishal. He says, if a newcomer wants to pursue a career in deformity correction, please guide us.
Go to Dr. Mangal, would be my advice.
Career in deformity correction is, I don't know, Vishal is
Hello.
Oh, internet connection.
हाँ.
Yeah.
सुनाई दे रहा है ना मेरा?
Yes, yeah. You're back now.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
So what I would say is, one, you have to have your basic orthopedics strong. Trying to become a deformity correction surgeon in your second year of residency, right? You have to be a good orthopedic surgeon to start with, and that holds true whether you want to become a deformity correction surgeon, whether you want to become an arthroplasty surgeon, whether you want to become a pediatric surgeon. Your basics have to be sound. So for 3 to 5 years of good basic orthopedics, and then keep educating yourself more and more. Nowadays, there are quite a lot of courses. There's a lot of material available on the web. And then finally, if you really want to do that as a high level thing, then you have to do at least a year and a half, 2 years fellowship with somebody who does a large number of these things, so that you imbibe all of the essential principles, you know. Like I did a fellowship with Peli, and I found that extremely, extremely useful, because when you see the same thing over and over again, it really lays down your basics. You don't have a problem with your basics. So I think we are
we are done. Any more questions from the attendees, ma'am?
No, I don't think any more coming now.
Okay, so I would now hand over to Dr. Harpal, sir, please.
Yeah, if there are no more questions, then we'll close this session. Again, IACON Lucknow 2023, and we promise to come back with the next interesting topic of infected non-unions. And I assure you it will be as interesting as was today's engrossing talk. Mangal, I'll communicate with you regarding the time and date, and we want to take it forward in different methods. Some people, like you, have started doing a single stage. I do in 2 stages. Dr. Altaf has a different method. PN, from his institute, there's a guy who does it totally in a different way. Siddharth has his own potential. So we like to take up, because it's a very important topic for a common trauma surgeon, infected non-unions. So I hope to be back. I hope that Norzone will be able to be back in 2 weeks' time with a fresh topic. Again, the focus will be Elizarov, but we'll obviously consider other options to treat infected non-unions as such. So thanks a lot, Mangal, for your for sparing your valuable time. We feel obliged, and have a good night and have a great weekend to all of you.
Thank you.
Okay.
So on behalf of Jackson Park, I'm Dr. Deepika Chabra here, along with my teammates. We are all really thankful to all the experts who have joined us from all across India. Jackson Pal is the makers of injection Metadec, Nandrolone Decanoate for improving physical functioning and quality of life. And we have recently launched Cola 2, a collagen peptide type 2 supplement. We would like to go a long way in knowledge sharing with the attendees coming in and joining in with this super specialty. And thank you so much. Till the next webinar, we bid a goodbye to all. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye, guys.